Okay, a lot of the points we've already covered, so I won't sort of rehearse those again, because a lot of what's been covered in sort of working together at a global level also covers the mutual learning, but I'll try and bring out some of the key differences. I think the first point that was made was that whether we're a big NGO or a grassroots organisation, the bottom line is that we're providing a service to our customers, our beneficiaries. So that has to be done in a way that makes them feel respected and with dignity, and perhaps even with a sense of humour to help them through their difficult circumstances. There are some key barriers to learning established perhaps from the big organisations, which mostly stem around their arrogance towards grassroots organisations. And it's questionable how much the contributions of grassroots organisations are recognised at different levels throughout organisations. So when you get to the board level of a big NGO, does it really recognise the work that's going on in mutual partnership with the grassroots organisations? On the other side, from the grassroots organisations, they have to recognise that where the NGOs are coming from is from their many years of experience of working in the field. And that's what they bring to the table. And so what may appear to be their arrogant approach may sometimes be because the grassroots organisations have to prove their experience and their knowledge to gain the respect of the larger NGOs. We talked about volunteers being motivated by primarily humanity. So what drives them to volunteer in the first place is their humanity and their wish to help the beneficiaries that they're working with. Whereas, of course, with the big NGOs, there may be career aspects that people are, I'm not saying they don't have humanity, but they will have career aspects as well. So they will have other interests. And the difficulty across both NGOs and grassroots organisations is making the knowledge available at all levels. We discussed about how we gain that knowledge and where we learn that knowledge from, whether it can always be top-down or whether we have a bottom-up approach to learning from what is actually going on the ground. And then how do we gather that knowledge and experience for future use? And of course, ideally, we should have a bottom-up, top-down approach so that we take the lessons, we learn from them, we develop learning and shared learning that can go across organisations. We need common vocabularies. One of the big issues that we have across all of the NGOs and organisations is common vocabularies. So even within organisations, they have different vocabularies for the same thing. We had an example from British Red Cross that their international language is sometimes very different from what is used within the UK. So we have to establish those sort of working groups and partnerships, or if not partnerships, full partnerships, then sort of peaceful coexistence between the NGOs and the grassroots organisation that allows them to share those experiences that they have in the field. One of the issues we identified was a problem for both NGOs and grassroots organisations is the turnover of volunteers. A lot of these people are there for short times. With the NGOs, it may be short-term contracts. With volunteers, it's that they're there for 2 weeks on holiday, they've given up their time, but then they have to go back to their day job. Of course, they may volunteer on numerous occasions, but you also get a certain percentage that will be new into the volunteering role. So how do we spread the learning to those? And how do we establish the learning circles that will actually divulge that information to make sure that whatever job they are doing, they've had the basic training, the basic learning, and have the basic understanding of what is going on within their sphere. And the final issue, I think, penultimate issue we identified was the issue of supplanting local volunteers, particularly within grassroots organisations. So where an event happens and the first people on the ground are the local people who start the initiative, give the first response to it. But then when we start moving in international volunteers, we suddenly start supplanting the local volunteers. And the question then is, once the gloss has gone off the operation, and the international volunteers start moving out again, have we then lost the trust of the people who initially started the response to come back in and fill their place? Or how do we maintain that interest so we don't have that issue when they come? So it's how do we deal with the local staff and making sure that they're kept on side with us. We also discussed the question asked was about organisations. So what's the extent of organisations? And like a previous group, we decided that actually it's all organisations with whom we might deal. So we didn't expressly say the military, but I think that's implicit in it. But it's also commercial organisations. How do we work with commercial organisations? How do we learn from their expertise as well in working in these sort of areas? So commercial organisations as well as NGOs and grassroots, and how do we bring it all together?